Hello, everyone. It's Lionel Sandner from Pembroke Publishers, and thanks for joining us this evening for our webinar on teacher wellness. Just before we get started, I would like you to know that Pembroke Publishers' head office is situated upon traditional territories of the Wendat, the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mississaugas-Escougog, Hiawatha First Nation, Alderville First Nation, and the Métis Nation. The treaty covering this area of land in Toronto, Ontario is collectively known as the Williams Treaties of 1923. I would also like to acknowledge and thank the WSÁNEĆ people on whose traditional territory I live, work, and learn. The WSÁNEĆ people have lived and worked on this land since time immemorial. And I wish to recognize the significant contributions of Indigenous peoples across this land. We seek a new relationship with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, one based in honor and deep respect. And now it's my pleasure to again welcome you to our webinar this evening. And this is kind of an exciting webinar for us because we're trying a slightly different format where we can see on the screen with me are three presenters, and I'll introduce them as they do their first presentation for about 10 minutes each. And then we're going to come back together for the second half and just have a bit more of a panel discussion around some of the topics that they'll be touching on in the first part of the session. So as I said earlier, you are more than welcome to drop questions into the chat. I'll moderate that and try to bring as many forward as we can within the panel. But we're coming off a pretty crazy year, and I suspect educators across the country have spent a lot of time looking after other people and caring for other people in the ways that make us all professionals in what we do. And my sense is that a lot of folks have not taken that time for themselves. And yes, the summer's there, but there's still demands on there. And so today we have three of our authors coming together to spend some time kind of giving their perspectives on teacher wellness and kind of what does that mean now, but also what does it mean as we move into the next school year, being there's just so much uncertainty around the fourth wave and what does that mean? And every province is different and the challenges that come with that. So I hope over the next hour, as you're listening, if things don't make sense, if you're wondering, one thing about a Pembroke Publisher webinar is you can ask any question you want. That's you. The authors are here for a reason. You know, they have something to say, but they also bring a wealth of experience from their career. So please feel free to drop any type of question in there, and we'll try to weave it into our conversation. So with that, I would like to introduce our first of three presenters. And as I said, each will talk for about 10 minutes around the idea of teacher wellness, and then we'll come back together. So I'm not sure how on your screen everyone sort of gets positioned camera-wise, but for me, she's right underneath me and smiling now. So it's my pleasure to introduce Lisa Bush. You may know her from her book, Teaching Well. You may know that she's also done webinars with us before on mindfulness. And I remember this very clearly, Lisa, when I introduced you last time, just being absolutely amazed, being a fourth generation educator. I think I'm only second generation in my family. So there's definitely experience in the genes in there. But in your writing and in your talking, I know that you understand the need for and are very passionate about teacher wellness. You've taught for 15 years and presented internationally on language arts, fine arts, gifted education, and as well as teacher wellness. So home is Calgary for you, and along with your husband, two fine children that I see are all that cleaned up the place behind you. So you're all ready to go now. So with that, we'll turn our cameras off and just give you the floor and a few minutes to be able to just share some thoughts with the group.
Okay, well, thank you, Lionel, and thank you all for joining us this evening or afternoon, depending on which end of the country you're tuning in from. And thanks for taking the time with Pat, Kara, Lionel, and myself to talk a little bit about back to school. And I'm going to focus, it's 10 minutes. It's not a long time. And I really want to focus on mental health tonight, because I think that that is such an important discussion that we need to be having as we start the school year. And so I'd like to start with a story. As an educator, we love to teach through stories. And I think that this story kind of illustrates collectively what we've gone through over the last year, and it might shed some light on where we are collectively right now as we start to go back into the school year. And so the story takes place a year ago. So it was last summer, and I actually was just starting a podcast. It's a podcast I created, and it focuses on wellness. What else? I'm passionate about that, specifically women's wellness. And I reached out to a counselor, a therapist here in Calgary, to see if she wanted to be a guest on my first podcast. And she said yes. It's Karen Turnock. And like I said, she's a counselor here that focuses on women's mental health in Calgary. And so I sent Karen a year ago a list of 7 interview questions for this podcast. And these questions were all based off of very recent one-on-one conversations that I had had with 5 teachers in Calgary. So these questions were based on where teachers were in regards to their physical and mental well-being, what their hopes were for the school year, what their anxieties might be. And based on that, I typed up the questions and mailed them to Karen. Well, life happened, as it does, as we know, as teachers, as parents. Karen is a mother to 2 kids. I'm a mother to 2 kids. And with the whole back to school and career and life, the podcast episode was never recorded. It was just this summer that Karen touched base with me, and she said, "Lisa, do you want me to speak on your podcast about mental health?" And I said, yes, because I think a year ago, we needed to have that conversation. I think this year we urgently need to be having these conversations. And so Karen and I met, and we looked over the questions, and we threw out every single question. We got rid of all 7 questions. And it's not that these questions were like irrelevant. I mean, there's some pillars to wellness, but I think collectively, we're just at a different place right now than we were a year ago. And so these talking points weren't relevant. So in my short period of time that I have with you, I just wanted to offer like 3 recommendations. And the first one directly relates to that. It's just, as we head into the school year, to take a minute to just acknowledge where we are with our mental health. And not only to acknowledge where we are with our mental health, but to do so without guilt and without self-criticism and without shame and without shoulding ourselves. I should be more excited for the school year, or I should be more positive, or I should be more enthusiastic. And to just kind of sit with ourselves and to say, you know what, I'm anxious. I'm really low energy. I'm having a hard time focusing. I'm apprehensive, and being okay with it. And so, again, that's one point that I really would like to encourage all of us, educators, parents, as we go back into the school year. The second point is directly interconnected to that, I think. And it's recognizing, without trying to downplay it or, sweep it under the carpet, what we have just experienced, and truthfully, what we are still experiencing now. I've been doing a lot of research over the last year on burnout and on rest and on creativity and focus, and how they're all related. And I've heard already, with conversations with friends of mine, with conversations with other educators, things like, I just feel like I should be a little more disciplined. I feel like I need a little more focus. And it breaks my heart when I hear that, because I think that if we're not having the energy we feel like we should have as educators, if we're not having the enthusiasm we feel like we should have as educators, at this point, for most of us, I'd say for all of us, it really has nothing to do with, self-discipline. It has nothing to do with willpower. It really has to do with, right now, we probably need rest. And I know it's the end of the summer, but I have two small kids, and I don't feel particularly rested, right? I think a lot of us need rest. I think a lot of us probably need to be able to process our grief and maybe the loss we felt over the last year. We probably need to be able to complete the burnout cycle. I've been doing a lot of reading on burnout and the physical and cognitive implications of it. We probably need to get ourselves out of, the fight or flight mode that we've been in, because of the uncertainty and the lack of consistency. And so the second part, again, it goes to just acknowledging where we're coming from and honor it. And I have another story to share with you that happened earlier this week. And I thought as educators, you would get this. So my daughter is starting a new school next week. We're changing her school. And just this week, I think it was Monday, she said to me, Mom, I'm worried about going to my new school. And I thought, thinking, what would a second grader be worried about starting a new school? I thought, okay, maybe she's worried about friends. Maybe she's worried about a new environment. Maybe she's worried about a teacher that she doesn't know. And I asked her, I said, well, tell me more. What are you worried about? And she said, I'm worried I'm going to get sick. And in that moment, two things happened that I think it's really important for educators to understand. Number one, as you can imagine, I felt an immense sense of grief and loss. But also in that exact same moment, I felt the need to be the adult. I felt the need to be the helper. I felt the need to, push my own needs and emotions down and be there to listen to my daughter. And after I had a moment to kind of process that, I thought, this is what educators are facing multiple times within a day while teaching during a pandemic. It's kind of, I talk about it as like this undefined loss. It's these little moments, right? It's never being able to teach that lesson plan because you were sent home and you had to quarantine for 14 days, or it's, not being able to celebrate graduations with your students, or not being able to hug a colleague or an administrator that was retiring or moving. And so I think as we start this new year, just honoring that, honoring how we're feeling and honoring our experience. I'm optimistic that when we go back into the schools, our administrators, our school leaders, our counselors are going to be ready to have these conversations and are going to be encouraging us as teachers to be able to talk about and to be able to embrace like this full range of emotions that we might be going back and feeling. One friend of mine just mentioned to me today that her school, the first conversation they had going back as part of professional development was over grief and loss. And then they spent the whole next day having time to process that conversation. So I'm hoping that, we'll be in environments where that's encouraged and that conversation is being had. And I see Lionel. I want to make one last point. It's a short one. It's a little more positive. But I think it's just going to this year thinking, what do you want? And this is something that Karen Turnock mentioned as I was recording our podcast session together. And it's something I talk a lot about in Teaching Well. Like, what do you want as educators? And not being afraid or worried about what you should be doing or what you need to be doing or what expectations might be, but what do you want? And really using this school year as an opportunity to kind of rewrite the script of how you want to see things happening in your classroom, your relationship with your students, and just what do you, as a person, as a human, and as an educator, want for this school year?
Now comes the toughest part of everything is now I'm used to just having a conversation right now with everything you've just said in those 10 minutes, but we're going to put that on hold and come back together after our other two presentations and continue that conversation a little bit more. And I especially like that last question, what do you want? I think it's a tough question to ask teachers because they're used to answering that, asking that question to everyone else. So that's a to be continued in about 20 minutes. So thank you very much, Lisa.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, folks, we're just going to do a quick switch here. I'm going to throw some slides up here for Kara, and she'll pop up here in a moment. There she is. Hello. So now we'll move on to our second presenter. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Kara Dymond. You may know her from her book, The Autism Lens, and her presentation. We had someone just interloped in there. And from her presentation on autism, and you'll know that she has an autistic brother, and that is part of her passion around teaching at OEZ when she's in the special education. But she also brings to bear a passion for talking about teacher mental health and self-care. So we're sort of getting to see the other side of your professional practice, Kara, here. So welcome. It's great to have you here, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks. I have to say, I don't always practice what I preach, but I am trying to be better. About a year or so ago, I attended a mindfulness workshop through Pembroke with Lisa, who just spoke, and Shelley Murphy. And I was trying to multitask, making some dinner while listening. And I set a kitchen fire, which I just thought, oh, this is a microcosm for everything that's going on right now. So sometimes we have to pause. We have to be still. There's so much anxiety in the world around us. And there's this feverish pace that we all feel like we're expected to operate. And I've noticed that every year, students and teachers seem to be more and more anxious. And of course, the year and a half of the past pandemic has been no exception. So I like to think about classrooms as being a safe haven. And this has benefited my students, but it's also benefited me so much as a teacher because I model strategies, which means I'm actively practicing different things with my students. I try and present a smorgasbord of strategies, if you will, because everyone needs different strategies at different times. And I want students to be introduced to different tools so that they find what works for them. And I often think about strategies as falling into different categories. You have thinking strategies, which are things like affirmations. I can do this. I can do hard things. Mantras, which are statements you might say over and over to yourself. And I use those myself professionally. Every year I set an intention for myself. My first year of teaching, it was a Russell Barkley quotation. Children who need love the most often ask for it in the most unloving ways. And it really helped me to be more patient and avoid, to the best of my ability at the time, some power struggles. So every year, that's something that is part of my personal practice. I love teaching students physical strategies, different types of stretching, ways that we can move our bodies to get out energy or restore energy. Relaxation activities. We talk a lot about the things that we love to do, whether it's hobbies, breathing, mindfulness. I do something called Song of the Day after the lunch recess, which is the longest recess. And so it's good to have activities to transition through that are calming, where we think about, okay, what's the meaning of this Song of the Day? And I believe in building in different types of self-care and mindfulness throughout the day in different ways. And I also teach students different focusing strategies because I want them to find what works for them. So some students can listen to a lesson without any special tools. Some students, do better when they doodle, but that doesn't work for everyone because some can get so absorbed in the doodling that they miss what is going on around them. So maybe they need an ideas journal or a fidget. And Another important thing that we can do is checking in about how everyone's feeling, and in different ways, because autistic students, but many other students as well, have difficulty identifying and labeling their feelings. My students, I found, were actually especially expressive when I found an online website that allowed you to create art. So I had them paint their feelings, and then share if they wanted to. I found different soundboards and had them design a sound effect that expressed their emotions. So that was when we were online virtually. Or, which of these gifts do you feel most like? And I will be doing a little emotions check-in with you in a few moments. Another important thing is to have free access tools, sensory tools. I sometimes have breathing exercise cards around the room, coloring sheets, a quiet area where students can select to go if they just need a pause, if they need a moment to sit and reflect, a bin of different types of fidgets. Now, the caveat about that is you have to teach how to use tools. Otherwise, they might be used as toys. So that's something when I introduce new tools, I always talk about, okay, how do we use this as a tool? What does it look like when it's being used as a toy? And then it's easier for me to prompt later and say, I'd like you to use that as a tool. Because then they know, everyone knows what the expectations are around that. And what's really interesting about free access sensory tools, once you've taught them about the tools, there's novelty the first few days where everyone wants to use whatever it is that you have in the sensory bin. But that wears off, and soon it becomes the students who actually need those tools are the ones who elect to use those tools. I also think it's important to get students thinking about their own learning needs, getting them to share what helps them at different times. And that's something I really moved towards this year. My practice was really transformed by the pandemic and having to do things in a different way. So I had students, instead of having reward systems in my classroom and things like that, I had students set their own goals and self-assess. And I would check in with parents and their other classroom teachers to find out how things were going. But I really wanted the students to be thinking about their own needs, how they felt about how they were doing. And I would just coach them. I would say, what's currently hard for you? What is it that you want to work on? What part of that is hard? How do you think we can make that easier? What do you think you could do? Or what could we ask your teacher or your parent for to help you with that? And every week we would touch base and say, okay, how's it going? Is there anything that's easier? Why is it easier? What strategies did you put in place? And then students were able to switch to new goals as they felt that they had mastered the previous goal. And then the next thing I would do, and I think this was more important potentially, was whatever we had discussed at the end of our conversation, I would say, okay, what are you doing for your own self-care this week? What are you doing that you enjoy? And they would show me themselves playing piano, or they would cook on screen for me when we were virtual. And I think that's a more authentic way, rather than a reward system, which is more about, okay, I'm going to dole out something to you because you've met my expectations. And it's about compliance. This became more about being an autonomous learner. And it's like what we do as adults. At the end of a difficult day, you go home, you might decide to take a bath, or go for a jog, or have an ice cream bar, or pour yourself a glass of wine. And I feel like that's an important life skill that we need to be teaching. And self-care is a right. And hopefully it's a lifelong skill, so not a short-term performative act. And I want them to be able to make decisions about their own self-care needs, things that serve them and that restore energy, especially in years like this year where everyone is so much more drained, both the teachers and the students. And ultimately, what I think all of these things do is it's part of creating a caring community where you can share those strategies that you're using with one another. And it's about how you talk about the literature in your classroom. You might be able to ask your class, what advice would you give this book character if you were their friend? What do you think they could do to handle their big feelings? What might you suggest that they do? And as teachers, I also think it's important that we be vulnerable with our students. We share our own feelings, our own self-care practices, obviously at an age-appropriate level, and maintaining those boundaries. And let students offer you advice as well. When I was defending my dissertation, I told students a few days in advance I was going to be away. I told them, oh, I'm a little bit nervous. I have this big life event happening. And all of them started chiming in and saying, you know what you should do, Miss Dymond? You should take deep breaths before. One student said, drink herbal tea. And so I was just delighted that they felt that they could contribute. And I made sure that I did those things. And when I came back to the classroom the next day, I told them, thank you. Thank you so much for your advice. I did those things. I drank herbal tea and it helped me. Because another important part, I think, about the environment, the safe haven that we create, is that students know that they have an impact on you as a teacher, that we are interdependent with one another. And all of these things, putting these things in place in your classroom gives you that moment of pause too. It helps you to restore a sense of calm. And they help your classroom to be a refuge for everyone in the room. I'm going to show you a couple of other things here. So this is a free template on my website. I filled out an example, so you see part of that here. But you can teach students to identify different tools that they can use at different times, and that everyone does different things. What we really want to do is normalize the idea that learning tools are for everyone in the room. Everyone uses these things. And we're now going to do a little emotions check-in. And I did this with my graduate students who are adults, but this is the kind of thing you can do with your students as well. So I want you to take a moment and think, what is it that your body and mind need today? And you can put the number in the chat. So if you need number 1, maybe you need mantras, affirmations, reminders of your self-worth, gratitude or mindfulness. Or 2, maybe you need like one of those body needs, a meal, water, to eat mindfully, some sort of treat. Or 3, movement, exercise, dancing, singing, laughter. Or 4, stillness, nature, quiet, rest, time to think. Or 5, reading, listening to music, playing a video game, knitting, talking to a friend. And I want you to try and commit to doing one of those things today. And I did this with my graduate students over the summer, and every week I had them self-assess, just like I had my elementary students self-assess. And they started telling me, you know what, today I was feeling like I had so much to do and I was feeling overwhelmed, but I thought about this class and I went for a walk, or I decided to do some knitting. And one of my students, and I'm going to end with this, sent me this painting, and she said, you know what, I haven't been creative in a long time, but you reminded me to take a pause if I had to drop a reading and just take care of myself. And I painted this. And I just thought that's extraordinary. And it's such a gift to be able to teach and to be able to help students, nurture students to be like whole human beings, because it's not just about the curriculum. It's about teaching them how to handle life. And life is not about just being productive. It's about taking care of ourselves and nurturing all parts of ourselves.
Great, good. Thank you, Kara. I really like that last slide. Just sort of having that 6. It all of a sudden took everything we're talking about and really started to drive it home in a practical way. So thank you for that.
And she allowed me to share that with permission.
Yeah, that's great. Good. Thank you. Okay, well, we'll see you in a few minutes here after Pat. And so we'll just do a switch here, folks. And I'm going to do a couple things. Pat, I'll just do a quick sound check. You're okay there?
Yeah.
Perfect. Good. There we are. Okay, great. Well, now it's my pleasure to introduce our third presenter for today. And beside me on the screen is Pat Trottier, who's been actively involved in education in the wonderful province of Manitoba, more specifically Winnipeg, for more than 30 years. She's worked with students at all levels, early, middle, and senior years, as a teacher, a resource specialist, and an administrator. She's committed to professional development for her teachers when she was teaching, and now more on the leading side, as well as working on developing curriculum for early years teachers, and the award-winning video to do the same thing. You may also know her as one of our authors and the book Relationships Make a Difference. So Pat, I know this is your first time with us, so it's great to have you join us, and I'll pass the virtual mic over to you.
Okay, thanks, Lionel. Well, I'm really happy to be here this evening. I'm a retired educator, but I keep myself busy. Our eldest son was born with an intellectual disability, so I'm like his resource teacher in trying to keep his support team all together. So it was really fun putting this presentation together. The role of relationships in helping teachers stay well and support their students. I feel that relationships are authentic when we build them on a strong foundation of positive, respectful connections with our students and their families. And it really makes a big difference. It's very helpful when you're positive. Let parents feel comfortable around you. We are the positives. What are the positives in a situation? Some parents may have had negative experiences with the school system. If a parent is anxious or upset, remain calm and collected. Suggest you talk again another time if you haven't finished your conversation. And you'll find over your conversations in the future that the parents will be a lot calmer and enjoy their conversations. Having daily conversations, as much as possible, be available before and after school to greet your students and families at the door. Make it a part of your daily routine. I met so many grandmas that were parenting their grandchildren and wanting to make difference in their lives. As a teacher, I made sure I was part of that support too, and it really made a big difference. Listening carefully. Be present in your conversation with students and their families. And I know we've got so many things on our mind all the time, but it's really important. Make sure you're looking at them and showing that you hear what they say. I usually carry a pen all the time, and when I don't have paper, I write on my hand. This is another way to show parents that you are interested and care about their children. Whoops. Yes. Yes, sorry. Okay. Building trust. By taking time to be positive, having daily conversations, and listening carefully, students and parents will start to trust you. They will believe that you want the best for them. This trust will make it easier for you when you could have difficult discussions with parents regarding their children, if they have special needs, if they need extra assessments, if they are finding learning really easy and you want to make challenges for them. So, once you have built that trust, parents are willing to listen to you more, which is really helpful. Setting classroom goals. It's really helpful to set classroom goals so everyone can work as a team, and children just love this. Team rules within a classroom support student growth and learning and develop important social skills like respect, tolerance, and fairness. I use the Moral Intelligences by Michelle Borba. These have been used in the whole school and the community, so everyone is speaking the same language, and it's great when you hear the children using it as well, because it's like you're all on the same page. Setting team goals. Every child should be part of a support team with their teacher and parent. It's important for parents to feel that they have an equal input into their child's education. They love their child and want them to succeed. The student is empowered to be part of this team, and it helps develop independency and the drive to be successful in their learning. So, yeah, when you have that team, it really makes a difference in the child's life. Sharing classroom learning. Children love to do this. Still, students will be learning at different levels within the classroom, but everyone will be working on similar math, writing, reading, and science and social programs. This is evident within the classroom, and students can explain their work to their parents at teacher-parent interviews and at other community school events at school. Okay, I put together a list of activities that could be helpful at the start of the school year. I talk about an orientation evening. You can do other things as well, but you can have an orientation evening in person or virtually with your students and their families, and it's a great way to start the year. Share this information with families before the summer break if you can, or if you have to send a letter through the mail, you can do that as well. Attached to this webinar is a parent invitation and parent survey. You can adapt it according to your students and your needs and everything, but it could be a start for you. When I taught early years, I would have a barbecue with some families too, and I still have a glass bowl that I tried to return to the correct family, but no one said it was there. So every time I look at that bowl, I remember our fun barbecues. Home visits. It's great to have home visits to students in person or virtually. When you're meeting your students in their home, you learn to appreciate the dynamics of their family and develop a deeper connection. I remember a meeting that I had one time with a student who his only way to get around was in a wheelchair. And when we went to his home, we found that there was no way for the parents to get in, to bring their child into their home unless they carried him. So with our conversation, we were able to get our physiotherapist involved with the family, and she was able to go out and talk about different ways the family would be able to, move their child into the home and out successfully. So that was a great visit. Summer journals. It's great before summer break if you can give summer journals to the students you'll be working with the next year. They can draw on it, write in it, and talk about their hobbies, their likes and dislikes. And then students can bring these back to the orientation evening, or if you have appointments at the beginning of the year, it's something that they can carry. And if they're feeling nervous about coming to school, they'll be able to bring this and talk about it and talk about what they were able to do over the summertime. So it's something to consider. It's really helpful to have a classroom website with information for parents and children. Parents should have access to their child's classroom site, which will be full of information about what their children will be learning for the year, up-to-date homework and test information, and places where parents can leave you questions or requests to phone them. And sometimes I give my phone number to parents as well. It just depends on the situation. It's important to have parent volunteers. Parents love to be helpful in the classroom. They can help you with your website. They can collect and collate materials. They can work individually or with groups of students. And sometimes they can share their career paths with your class at a later date. So parents love to be part of the classroom, and their students love their parents to be there. Team teaching. Sometimes you may be able to collaborate with same level grade teachers to work through developing your classroom programs throughout the year. This really helps because you can team teach and you can collect all your curriculum ideas together, and you can work with smaller groups of students, and that's really beneficial. And my last idea is administration support. Make sure your classroom plans with your administration you keep them updated as to what you're going to be doing. You're going to be doing class visits, etc. Keep them updated so they can be on top of everything and will know how to react when questions come to the office. And make sure when you do class home visits that you let the office know when you're leaving and let them know when you're coming back so they're aware of where you're at. It's just a good safety feature too. And just one more slide here. Okay. As a teacher with established teams of parents and students, I feel relaxed coming back each fall to my classroom. But I understand living through the COVID, you have just so many other issues going in your personal life. So, you have to take these into consideration as well. And as Kara and Lisa were saying, you need to look after yourself and make sure you take time for yourself. I feel like I'm going back to a welcoming community where I have positive relationships with my students and their families. I feel happy, motivated, and ready for all kinds of exciting challenges. And I just want to read an excerpt with all the pictures. They were from a family night that we had at one of our schools, and it was an exciting evening for everyone. Students and their families were invited to attend a fun-filled evening of center-based mathematics at the end of January. The intent of Family Math Night was to participate in math standards and see them in action as we strengthen the mathematical applications, problem solving, and communication skills of our students through the power of family action. Students and teachers carried boxes and papers and class equipment to their school gym to set up for a Family Math Night. Each grade level had several tables to set up for their math centers, and the math curriculum from K to 8 was set up around the gym. It had taken us since the fall to get ready for this family evening. Families started arriving just before 6 o'clock, and children pulled on the arms of their parents to hurry into the gym. They had important games and work to show them. Parents sat with their children at tables and worked through different math games together. Teachers were stationed at different centers to help students jump from one card to the next, place card patterns on the floor, and create designs on paper. They welcomed parents and encouraged students to help their siblings. Everyone was involved in having a great time with their family. It was an exciting community event, and I hope when you go back to school in the fall, that you feel that you're in a place where you can plan these important community events, because it's great when everyone's together, and when children come with their siblings and their parents. We just had a great time. So good luck in developing your own community projects and experiencing the joy of working together as a school community. And that's the end of my presentation. Thanks, Lionel.
Good. Thanks, Pat. I'm just going to remove your slide deck there and invite our other two presenters back for the last few minutes, and see if we can expand on a few of the themes that were there. So there we are. I think everyone's back. I'll just do a quick sound check. Everyone can hear everyone? Everyone can hear us?
Mm-hmm. Hopefully.
Yep, there we are. Good stuff. Good.
Yep.
Good. Well, thank you to the three of you for taking some time to share some thoughts around teacher wellness. And I sort of feel like we started some big picture stuff, Lisa, with you, and that I mentioned that question of what do you want as educators, and then Carrie drove us down to some examples, especially with the kids, but I think also applicable to the teachers as well. And then Pat reminding us and emphasizing the importance of family. All of those are pieces within the self-care teacher wellness piece. And I guess sort of in the back of my head, I'm sort of thinking is how do we, moving forward, walk the talk of everything that you're talking about here, right? I think a lot of us got into education because we want to teach, but also because we have probably a pretty high level of empathy for caring for others. And so the comments, Lisa, you were making about the guilt and the shame, I'm not even sure if that's what sometimes I felt, but maybe it was. I just said, I'm tough. I'm the teacher. I can deal with it, right? And you sort of move on, and it'll be okay for me because I'm the teacher. So I'm wondering, with the pandemic, has that maybe changed our perspective on what teacher wellness is a bit? Lisa, do you want to maybe start us off if you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. Yes, I have a lot of thoughts on that, as you can imagine. I think it has, is a short answer. And so when I've talked about teacher wellness in the past, for example, in Teaching Well, a lot of the wellness that I was addressing is just maintenance. I'll call it maintenance. It's just handling the day-to-day stress that comes with living and working and teaching. So the going for long walks, getting 8 hours of sleep, drinking your water, eating enough nutrient-dense food during the day. And I think it's shifting, Lionel, to maintenance is still very important, but it's recovery. And I think that's what I was trying to explain. Like, now we're trying to recover from a year of ongoing low-level constant stress, which we know can lead to trauma within us, within our students. And so I see it's just adding another complexity to what wasn't really an easy task to begin with. And I think, again, it goes back to what I'm saying, and it sounds so simple, but just acknowledging it is the first step. Yeah. And then there are all sorts of things that we can do from there. But just acknowledging that the game has shifted a bit for us, for our students, for our school community, for our parents. Yeah.
I think that's a really good point. I realized about partway through last year that it seemed like some days I was just kind of numb. I didn't have a word for it. I didn't have, I was fine, but it just felt like I was sort of numb a little bit. And I think it's that sort of that low level stress that's there all the time. So yeah, no, I really appreciate that. Thank you. Kara, any thoughts to add to that?
I agree with Lisa that I felt all year when I was in schools just more drained than I normally would be at the end of the day. My self-care needs were so much greater. And I think whether it's conscious or unconscious, there is this consistent level of anxiety as we go about our day trying to enforce safety protocols. You're seeing people in masks all the time. So I think even for children, seeing that all the time, it's not what they're used to at schools, except for maybe the ones who are new to schools to begin with. Not being able to follow our normal routines, like eating in the staff room with colleagues, who are an important part of our community as teachers, and the ways that we help students have to shift. So for me, it definitely shifted a lot of my practices, which I talked a little bit about earlier. And just I was always thinking about what are the messages that I want to be sending my students. And a lot of it was, what does it mean to be human? You know, we can let the curriculum go to some degree, not entirely, but there are no curriculum police, which always makes me feel a little bit better. And so getting across this idea that more important than anything else are the learners in front of us as teachers, and shifting into that coaching and encouraging role and that relationship building like Pat was talking about, and just getting out of the way of students as they set their own goals. And I really believe in talking to students too about how we are all learners, we all need help, normalizing the ideas that we all need different learning tools. And it's okay. And it's not just some students need those things, but we all need those things. And this year, it was just a prime example. I was able to talk to students about what are some of the accommodations that I need. And I think as teachers, when we can be vulnerable like that, it helps students to accept what is hard for them, because we all have things that are hard for us. You know, none of us have all the cards in the deck. We all need to be able to identify what we need, what makes us feel better, what help we can have. And building in those activities that restore us. That was like the number one thing I think my students took away this year was, the more drained I am as a student and as a teacher, the more I have to do at home. So I would go home every day and like take a break before I did anything else, draw the blinds, cuddle my cats. And I would talk to students about that was something that I really needed. And then I could talk to students about what is it that you need and how do we advocate for those things with parents and teachers.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And Myra was sort of saying that I think similar to what both of you were saying so far, that it reminds her of a blog post that she read, and she gave the link there. Folks who are interested in that. Pat, I know the other two have sort of talked at sort of their perspectives of it. I'd be curious in terms of, you know, you were talking about relationships and you gave the example of the family night. We haven't been able to do that for a year. As much as meet the teacher night was, it's another night. You always got charged from it, right? Because you met people and you made the connections, and that's why your son does that kind of thing. We couldn't do any of that. So does that impact on how we look at teacher wellness as we move forward here?
Definitely, because we're all living lives now. Like I know our grandchildren, you know, they can't go to hockey or they can't go to soccer practice or whatever. So we're all in the same kind of life. I know that as a person who loves to swim, I haven't swam for a couple of years now since COVID started. So it really has an impact on your life. And one of the things I found beneficial, and I know we do at schools, is they talk about mindfulness, and it's, you know, about taking time for yourself and getting in touch with your feelings. And I think that can be really beneficial. I know myself, I find, you know, it gets you to think about what your needs are, because as a teacher, you're always thinking about your students, their families, etc. And the last thing you think about is yourself. So mindfulness is something that I would recommend, and it has, you know, lots of value.
Great, good, thank you. We had a little bit of an audio issue there, I think, with yours, but I think we got most of it. So thank you for that. Just to shift gears a little bit. Oh, no, it's not you. I think it's just your connection. So all is good there. Maybe sort of building on the importance then of self-care. Maybe I wonder if anyone has some thoughts a little bit on sort of that connection between self-care and good teaching. I know, Kara, you said, and I put stars beside this when you said self-care is a right. And that I thought that's a pretty powerful statement to believe that. And, you know, but I think that is connected to good teaching. I wonder if you can expand on that a little bit.
It's my belief that we're teaching students so much more than the curriculum. We are trying to teach them how to handle all of life's hurdles. And everyone processes that in different ways and at different stages. but self-care is a life skill. And I remember having a student who came to me, and I made a comment about, using strategies myself at one point in a lesson. And he went, "But you're an adult," or you don't have anger like me, which is great. Like, I'm so glad that I come across as really calm and that my students don't see my stress level all the time. But it got me thinking that if students don't see adults talking about the things that we do to take care of ourselves, they don't know that we do it, and they don't know that it's important to do, or they think that there's a problem with them because people are telling them you need to use your strategies. And I never want to send the message that my students are deficient. And no, absolutely not. Self-regulation is a human need that we all have. And so I think we have to talk about it and how we all do it at different times in our lives, and practice self-regulation in our classroom, and share the ideas we have and how we took care of ourselves. And, when we talk about what did you do on the weekend, we can just reframe that as, what did you do to take care of yourself on the weekend? And, it just brought me such tremendous joy that by the end of the school year, I had students who just would start volunteering that information. And they'd say, "You know what I did? I went out in the garden and I planted things," or whatever it was. They saw how much it improved their mental health over our time, especially when we were at home and online. And I know that's something they're going to carry forward with them. So we just have to sort of normalize, like, what does your brain need right now? What does your body need right now? And help everyone in the room learn about their own signs, their own triggers, and what they need in different circumstances.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So, I mean, you watch your kids grow through the year when you're doing that, don't you? So, yeah. Pat, I'm wondering, just I'm curious with sort of to build on what Kara was saying there. When we talk about family relationships and the relationships you build, what happens when you find a family that doesn't practice self-care? Have you had any? This may be too specific of an example, but you're building this relationship, but then the family may go, "We don't do that sort of thing." Is there any experience with that?
Yeah, I guess over my 35 years or whatever in teaching, I maybe 5 parents that were that difficult, but the majority are people you can get and you can reach. I know when parents start to trust me, I've gone to doctor's appointments with parents and their children and really helped them get the kind of help that they need. And I know this one situation, a parent unfortunately had missed a bunch of doctor's appointments ahead, and the doctor wouldn't have kept this one unless he knew I was coming. So with my being there, the child was able to update their vaccines. The child had been diagnosed with attention deficit, and they were able to get some medication, and it made such a difference in this child's life. So nothing's impossible. And I guess as a classroom teacher, I just find it so exciting when you can, meet challenges like that and become the person's friend. And I guess I go out of my way to be their friend.
Yeah, definitely. That came through. That really came through. So thank you. Yeah.
Well, and it helps. I was just going to say, it helps too if you've got some challenges in your life and share them in the right kind of situation, and then it just makes people feel better. Yeah.
And again, sort of like Kara was saying earlier, everyone thinks you get stressed out too. No, yeah, actually I do. Yeah, I'm a human as well. So that's great. Thank you, Lisa. In your presentation, you sort of had three things messages you wanted to give to folks. I'm not sure everyone might directly connect that to good teaching, but it seems like they were foundational, right? Like, take a minute, to for yourself. I'm trying to read my notes here as I go here, but don't be too hard on yourself, and then about honoring yourself. Is there anything you can add to that a little bit more in terms of how that connects self-care to good teaching?
Oh, well, absolutely. And I go back to what Kara has been saying a lot, is modeling it. And so one thing, it was an interesting shift when I was doing the research for Teaching Well, and then even afterwards, I it shifted the way I approach things. So when a student, would put his head down on the desk, and I've given this example before, and put his hoodie up, I would start back with like, how are you right now? So, I would go and sit down next to them and be like, I think I talked about this last year, have you eaten breakfast? How much sleep did you get last night? So I think like us doing it, I'm feeling insecure, I'm feeling tired. It shifts the way we look at things. When I had an inattentive, social studies grade 8 class at 2:00 in the afternoon, early on in my teaching career, I would have thought, be more entertaining or talk louder or crack a joke. And now I was like, we're all going for a walk, because I think I asked them, I said, how many core classes have you had today? And it turns out, that cohort had no gym, no options, and they had just been sitting in classes. So I think that just when we're in touch with and I talked about mental, but physical too, when I am able to start a class saying, I'm tired, I didn't get a lot of sleep, let's go easy on each other. And I've taught middle school. Obviously, it would be a different experience with like first graders, but I think we're modeling for the students, and we're also as teachers doing that with them. And then I'm going to take it even further. I found that a lot of times with parents, when speaking with parents that might be upset about something, just kind of going back to like the core. Right. So what is this? Are you anxious? I mean, I wouldn't, but I would think, okay, I think they're worried, or I think there's some anxiety happening here. So I definitely think it's something we could model in all parts of our school. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. Great. Well, thank you. I noticed we're coming up to the top of the hour, and I would like to leave a sort of a minute for each of you with some closing thoughts of what I'd like to leave the group of us with. But I, first of all, would just like
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Lionel.
Nope. It might be your connection again, Pat.
Okay.
So I'll just give me 1 second here. Let me try this. I'll boot you out for a second, but might bring you back. We'll try that and see if she comes back in here, folks. And I know she was having troubles with her connection before we started. So I'll just continue on here because we're getting near the end. But I'd like to just say thanks to all three of you for taking the time today to talk a little bit about an area of passion for you, but also, sharing some thoughts. And, I think I fall more on the side of, well, it doesn't really matter about me. It's about the kids. And you all three were able to find that blend between yourselves as people, as professionals, as teachers, and then, but also you kept weaving the students in, like you couldn't help not to, and the importance of modeling. And those are important messages as we move forward to, and I think what's going to be a fairly complicated year. So there's folks dropping notes in the chat right now saying thank you. So thanks to each of you for that. And as I said, I'd like to sort of leave you each with a minute or so just to close out with any final thoughts, and then we'll say goodbye to everyone. So Pat, if we've got you here, why don't we start with you?
Oh, okay. Well, I've really enjoyed this evening, and it's been great listening to Lisa and Kara, and I'm just so motivated. I wish I could be working with you tomorrow. But anyway, it's been a great evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Kara?
So one thing I always like to tell my graduate students who are all pre-service teachers is, and these are all things that I do, is we have to give ourselves permission to slow down, to have boundaries. So I have a cutoff time each day after which I don't check my email, because I know otherwise I'm going to be doing it at 2 a.m, and that's not good. And it's okay to say no. It's okay to wait a day or two to respond to an email, or to say, let me get back to you on that. Build in those activities for yourself that restore your energy. Don't say, oh, I have too much marking to do. No, that's actually when you need to do more. You need to do more for yourself. And that's important for you to do so that you can teach students about those boundaries and self-care needs. And my favorite thing is having a happy box. And I keep emails, I keep cards, I keep anything where I think, wow, like someone's saying I did a really good job here. And on those days where I'm having trouble seeing my impact, I open that box and it reminds me, because we do always have a strong negativity bias where we focus on like, oh, I'm not doing this well, or I'm not connecting with the student that I really wish I was connecting with. And having a box like that helps remind you that you do far more good than the opposite, and that you will always get to the other side of challenging moments.
Well, you can add to your happy box your slide with the 6 different things, because I'm going to try one each day, and then on Sunday I get to pick one of the 6 to do as well. So that gets added in there as well. So thank you very much, Kara. Lisa, yeah, I saw you go on mute there, so I think someone's coming through, but
Yeah.
we'll pass it off to you.
Yeah, no, I would just say thank you again for joining us. And as we're going to the school year, just be kind to yourself, be compassionate to yourself. And this is my mom hat, but as someone who's sending off a student into kindergarten and another student into grade 2 this year, just know as parents, we're just so grateful for you showing up and doing the incredible work that you do every day. So you're doing a phenomenal job. Yeah.
Great. Perfect ending. So on behalf of all of us folks, thanks for joining us. Lisa, Pat, Kara, and Kara's cat is doing a guest appearance. It's been great to have you here. We have another session next week, on September 1st, talking about math with Dr. David Costello. We'd love to have you join us as well. So have a good evening, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.